Good Monday morning. Here's a question for you. What's a Chargon? What's a Vinkali? Chargons and Vinkalis. They're part of the book, Vinetropes Adventures from Sherry L. Ross. And that has been our series this month, January 2018, for Time for Books. This is Yvonne DeVita, and I'm from lipsticking.com, and this is our video book series. What are Chargons and Vinkalis? You knew they were coming. I mentioned them in previous book reviews of this book. It's such a fantastic book. It took a whole month, and I actually could go on and on and on about it. But Chargons and Vinkalis are the bad guys, the evil people that are coming up in the book 2. This is book 1. Vinetropes Adventures. It's Return of the Vinetropes, and yes, I'll be reading a little bit out of it as I always do. But I wanted to let you know that I was in touch with the author. The author and I are becoming friends, even though we've only met via email. I'm really impressed and really excited about this author because she's my age. And this is her first book, and she admits it was a lifetime coming. I want to read a little bit about what she wrote to me in exchange to various emails, because I find it fascinating to understand why and how a book came to be. And I'm going to try and do this with as many books as possible to see how many authors will engage with us here on lipsticking.com. So here's some stuff I'm going to read from Sherry L. Ross that came to me via email and that I think is important in understanding the Vinetropes Adventures and this particular book, Return of the Vinetropes. I do this, by the way, because I am an author also. I am a writer, and like many people, I'm fascinated with the process of how did a book get done? How did it get written? How did it get produced? This book especially, because if you look at it, it's a substantial book, but it's a beautiful book also. And I've mentioned before that there are a ton of really great images that there's one. That were developed by Julie Bell, and that's one of the reasons I love this book. But listen, Sherry L. Ross in our communications wrote to me that the Vinetropes Adventures, Return of the Vinetropes, was a fulfillment of a childhood dream. She was a reader. Her father introduced her to wonderful books like Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and Stan Lee from Marvel. And I was just watching one of the movies. Which movie was it? Well, one of the Stan Lee movies, and he shows up in a whole of them, doesn't he? So she also talks about, despite living in a family of writers and artists, these activities were something the adults did. And it wasn't until I was 12 I read the novel At the Back of the North Wind by the 19th century Scottish author George MacDonald that I knew I wanted to write too. And I spelled his name wrong here. I want to show this to you. So, At the Back of the North Wind, George M-A-C, Donald. If you want to get that, I'm going to get that book out of the library. That's what I'm going to do. See, she influenced me already. And she goes on to talk about Lord of the Rings and the Narnia Chronicles and all the books that we read as children, those of us interested in fantasy and science fiction. And you know, if you've been to any of the other video book reviews, that this is a fantasy book. This is a book that has magic in it. This is a book that has the equivalent of fairies. They are the Vinetropes, but so they are not fairies, but to kind of get your head around what they might be. They're a plant-based form, an intelligent plant-based form, and that's just fascinating to me. So let me read a little bit more. Why did I mix sci-fi elements into my story, she says. Well, she answers the question, or she asks the question, what is magic? It is when someone special or powerful masters the forces of nature to do good or evil. What does science do then? It also masters the forces of nature to enable us to do all kinds of creative things. And it can be used for good or evil. So Sherry says, I had the idea if I was going to create a truly modern fairy tale that science and technology should play some role, and they do. They do. In this book, the fascinating part for those of us who love these kind of stories today, we love it when there's a lot of technology involved. That's why we love the Iron Man and all the sci-fi fantasy things that we see, Wonder Woman. There's technology involved. It isn't just brute strength. It isn't just magic when you snap your fingers and something happens. It's really important to build something in the story that has to do with the technology. There is a human element of where does magic and technology meet, and how do we talk about that? And you see it in all of the really good books, the Tolkien books, the Harry Potter books, and now you're seeing it in the Vinetropes adventures. So she says, and this was a big question. I asked it in an earlier video review. Vinetrope, where did that come from? And here's what Sherry Ross says: the noun trope is used as a figure of speech in literary sense, and usually refers to commonly reoccurring themes or devices or categories. She's using trope as a literary device, she says. It refers to the many symbolic meanings of vine, such as its universal implication of connectedness, in which everything is connected from one place to the other, like a growing vine. Vinetrope. And that's what Lucinda is. Our friend Lucinda, who's a rhymer and shares a lot of poems in the book. She is a vine, and she's a trope. If we go on and look at another important element that I thought made the story so powerful, it helped me because I'm visual, but I really do enjoy books that have some pictures in them. I guess I never grew up out of the picture book stage. Yes, I read a lot of novels that have no images, and so I create the images in my mind, but I don't mind when the author kind of shares what she thinks that the images look like. And so in this book, it was Julie Bell who illustrated and made the cover and made the wonderful images inside. And she did a fabulous job, and she became a good friend of Sherry's and probably will be helping with book number 2. Now, before I read a little section from the book, the publisher of the book also interested me. As someone who was a former publisher, I did print-on-demand publishing 10 years ago. I'm always interested in the way a publisher takes a book and submits it to the world. And the publisher is ACC Art Books Limited, an English-based publishing house in Woodbridge, Suffolk, England, and known for producing high art books on antiques, gardens, biographies, and scholarly works. See, I can say it. So she became friends also with the publisher, whose name was Diana Steele. Now, the fun part of this is Diana Steele sold her business to a much larger publishing house with offices in Melbourne, Australia, and Hong Kong during the middle of the book. How would that make you feel? I'd be a little nervous. I would never want to hold anyone back. Love seeing success, love seeing women succeed, so would be there right with Diana rather. And the new owner looked at the book, fell in love with it just the way I did, just the way everyone is, and said, great, yes, we're still going to publish this book, we're going to represent this book. And so now there is a website, and the website, oops, is www.vinetropes.com. Easy to find, great images from the book at the website, talks about how the book came to be. Love it, love that there's a website, is going to be introducing book number 2. And Sherry is offering a poetry contest for kids. I remember this is a middle school book. It's really very interesting though, so it doesn't matter how old you are, you should get a copy and read it. She's starting in February. Who can write a poem that sounds like Lucinda Vinetropes? As I say, Lucinda writes a number of poems in the book. And she's going to be working with Girls Life to launch the contest on their website and kind of get things going for that. And I hope I can help her with that. Also, I hope when I announce it and let you know, you'll share it with the children in your lives. It doesn't have to be just girls. It can be boys. The story, yes, is Sarah. Sarah is the young lady. There's Lucinda. There's the squirrels. There are 2 squirrels there. If you look closely enough, there are 2 of them. Maybe there aren't. Maybe there's just one in that picture. But anyway, February, I will tell you more about that. Let me read just a little section because I like to do that in my reviews. I like to read a little bit from the book. And this one is going to be when Auletta is going to be going on a trip. Auletta is doing something special for Lucinda. I'm not going to tell you what, but before Auletta takes off, and she's the owl I showed you last time, this is what Lucinda says to her. "There is something I have not told you about," she stated frankly, lifting her arms to the side, her fingers spread wide as though asking to be understood. "And I hope you won't be mad. Everything has been happening so quickly, and it just did not come up. I mean, I had no idea you would make this offer. Auletta and I have only really come to realize the facts myself." "Enough," said Auletta. "Just tell us what it is." The boy's eyes widened. Those are the squirrels. "You must warn the Vinetropes if you find them that the Chargons and Vinkali may be back too." "What are Chargons and Vinkali?" Auletta fluttered her feathers. "They must be bad," Apkin deducted from Lucinda's tone. And then Lucinda had to give a full explanation of the unfortunate possibility of these evil creatures returning to the world. I can't wait for book number 2. This is Yvonne DeVita at lipsyncing.com, and this was Time for Books. And this month's book concludes Vinetrope Adventures, Return of the Vinetropes. I hope you'll get your copy and share the poetry contest when it starts in February. Talk to you next time.